we haven't actually mentioned him, and we should have at the very start. And I think this might actually be the intro to this podcast episode. Peter Chesters is the guy that has pretty much ran this with Kate's support. He's the head of demand generation at Barbour, and he led the whole thing in developing this. So hats off to you, Peter. Well done.
Hello, and welcome to a bit of a special, I guess, within the new Construction Disrupted format. For anyone watching this on YouTube, you'll see our usual sort of setup with 3 headlines, 2 opinions, and 1 takeaway. But slightly different. We're taking a deep dive into a report, and well, I think we feel able to, as we discussed in last week's episode, because we've done a lot of construction, not a lot of marketing, which is where the day jobs are for us. So anyone that's subscribed to this or listens to this because of the construction marketing element, hopefully you've been entertained enough with the construction stuff, and doubly hopefully, we're going to do our best to swing the pendulum back towards the marketing side of things today with a deep dive into a report from Barbour ABI on the case for marketing investment in the built environment. Now, I have to confess, I pushed Peter on this one because I got to the launch event of this in London a couple of weeks back. So I've got a little bit of additional intel maybe from the event that we'll be able to share. But some fascinating stuff in the report, Peter, when you've had a chance to look through it.
Yeah, of course I have, absolutely. With bated breath when they said they were going to do it, and waited for everyone to sign up and get their thoughts down, and then the big reveal, like you said, at the launch. I think the overriding factor for me was very much around AI. Lo and behold, it wouldn't be a 2 marketers talking about marketing and a marketing report without highlighting AI. But what I'd like to dive into first of all with that is the fact that where AI kind of sits within all of this. And on the intro to this report, Kate Perrin, who's the marketing director, she for Barbour ABI, sorry, she stated that 94% of respondents believe AI will have a major or moderate impact on the built environment. And from our conversations last week, if you haven't listened, listen into episode 88, the third headline we spoke about was the gap that's widening between those that are adopting and those aren't adopting AI. And from a marketing perspective, strategic marketing perspective, we should say, like basically everybody says that there will be some impact. And for those people that aren't adopting, they might be in a bit of trouble.
No, so it's a really good spot, and I think a crucial thing to probably start off with it is that respondents to this were the purpose of the survey was to engage with marketers and understand how marketing's seen within their organisation. So yeah, if there is a skills gap appearing within AI in the sector specifically, then marketers sound like they're on the front end of that. Which is can only be a good thing, can't it, given our opinion on where we think that's going. And not probably surprising, as you said at the very start of this, that it would be marketers that would be leading the charge on adoption and sort of being evangelical for these things within their organisations. I was going to zoom out a little bit actually on the need for this survey in the first place. There was for the marketers that are listening to this. Les Burnett, who's an absolute god of planning and strategy within the marketing world, and he of long and the short of it fame, for anyone that's as nerdy as me and sort of reads up on this stuff. He was talking at a conference hosted by Walk on marketing effectiveness a couple of weeks back, and talking very much his background, the kind of brands that he's worked on, principally famous for the John Lewis Christmas campaigns, for example. So those kinds of budgets, those kinds of channels, and so on, and maybe not requisite necessarily with the kinds of things that we would often see within construction. However, he was talking about the fact you can, whatever brand you are, you can't get away from the fact that investment is one of the most critical components when it comes to marcoms. You have a really clever idea. We know that existing sort of brand awareness and brand, love and ability to be called to mind and salience is hugely important. But that particular piece of comms is going to live in a dark corner of the internet somewhere without that investment. Again, in his world, he was talking about the case for marketing at board level and speaking and framing things in a way that CFOs and other kind of financial figures can understand it. in big businesses, and this will be the case in a lot of bigger construction businesses, £1 million is like a rounding up or rounding down error on their balance sheets a lot of the time. And yet marketers are going in with begging balls for sums that are much, much smaller than that. It's like, how are you going to convince this person that manages budgets of this size that your part of the business is equally as important when you can't command the kind of budgets that they're talking about? So a long way to go, I suspect, before we in the sort of medium budgets in the sector or anything like that.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's an
just
interesting one.
On that, and the lesbian Peter Field, long and short of it, if you haven't read it and you're into marketing, it's kind of a must to read it. And what they were saying is that 60%, roughly across industries, 60% of your budget within marketing should be long-term brand building. That's essentially what it's saying. Focus on your brand. But this report highlights that only 10% of a marketing budget is being spent on that brand. So for me, that highlights a number of things. But the one thing that stands out for me is that if you're focused on that brand and that long term, and you can, as this report has highlighted, hang on in there and get that money for that investment, you've got to do it, because it's only 1 in 10 organizations are doing it in this sector. So if you're one of those 10, if you do it correctly and link it with sales activation in the short term, you're going to be so ahead of the game in 12, 18, 24 months. You just are.
It's not an easy case to make. I think, we've spoken about it for several weeks on this podcast, and no one can avoid what the macro conditions look like. And I get, under those circumstances, especially people that are looking at P&Ls daily and looking at their budgets daily, I think it's fair to say that, well, and these things are related. If you don't get out there and kind of make the case for that budget and defend it, I think a lot of the time marketing can become kind of the soft underbelly. If people are looking at areas to cut and are thinking defensively, if you're in production, for instance, if you're a manufacturer within the supply chain, we need our raw materials, we need our people on the lines, we need all of the energy and everything else that's our sellable product. So what things can we cut back on? If marketing is thought of in those terms, then you're on an absolute hiding to nothing. One of the things that I was going to say was that the kind of the case studies all exist, the theory exists. A practical thing, because people always ask, this is all well and good for brands of a certain size and brands that have resource for this kind of thing. I was going to give a shout out, and I'm not affiliated in any way, but it's a free tool that I think is incredibly useful. There is a New Zealand business called Tracksuit, and they built a tool based on the 60-40 rule that you were talking about, Peter. And it's a very, very simple, it's a drop-down menu questionnaire of about 6 or 7 data points. If you go on there for your brand, it will give you the optimal budget split in terms of long-term brand building and short-term sales activation marketing, by which we mean your kind of search engine, social media, direct email marketing, the things that kind of the call to action would be click here to purchase this or have a conversation, whatever the case may be. I think, to be clear, Peter and I'm speaking for both of us here, aren't saying that stuff isn't important and don't do it. It's just that you and your marketing function are not doing yourselves any massive favors if you don't do that stuff. So, I'm happy to share links to that. Happy to have conversations with anyone that wants some advice on that sort of stuff. But I would say that these things are made much easier if you have budget and you can have someone consult on these things. But there are numerous free tools, and there's a lot of data to help you make that case. I would start with that.
We'll look for the links and put them in the show notes. And if we haven't put them in the show notes and you're trying to find them, reach out and we'll hook you up. It's been a long day. One thing that I thought was it could be seen as a negative, but I'm seeing it as a positive, as this report should be seen as a positive. We're shining a light on strategic marketing within the built environment, which it needs to happen. Is the fact that if budget wasn't a factor, what would you do first was one of the questions. And without a doubt, nearly 50% said increase the size of the team, but plus staff training, which says to me that if you look at what we were talking about first about AI and tech, well, it's undoubtedly, people are saying within marketing that tech is going to help us, assist us. It's going to change the way we do things. and get things done. It's not going to change the foundational structure of marketing, but it's going to help in terms of what we do and getting things done. But even if somebody had an infinite budget, they would still hire people. And I think that screams a bit of excellence in marketing at a higher level for me. The fact that people are seeing the fact that AI isn't going to take people's jobs, it isn't going to change the foundations of what makes a good marketer, but it will certainly help if we have the right people.
But love that, and I also love, because again, taking a slightly cynical view, I think probably linked to what we were discussing earlier. If you'd have asked me prior to seeing the data, what do you think the number one thing that people would have said? I would have guessed the performance marketing element of things. I would put more money into this particular channel, into this particular activity. So really, really heartening that people have, and again, probably unsurprising if these are senior marketers that reply to this thing, but that the people are taking that kind of broader view. And I think, you're more people, more skilled people. It's it can only be a good thing for the reasons that you outlined. So that was really encouraging. I think that people didn't jump down the rabbit hole. To go back a point, you mentioned it earlier in terms of that channel thing. One of the things that I found really, really interesting, not least that these are marketers that we're speaking to here, but one of the questions asked was, what has the biggest impact on winning work for your business? And number one on that still, for all of the various sort of channels that are laid out there, networking relationships still at number one, which I found fascinating. I don't know how you read that particular question.
I'm going to dig a bit deeper there. That was around about 25% of respondents said that.
Yes,
and that was followed by 20% said digital presence, which was the second highest. And if that does nothing else, that just highlights how. I'm going to stick with the foundational structure of marketing, how that doesn't change, and that we still need traditional channels, or what we class as traditional channels, as well as digital. It's not a separate thing. It's not put on a pedestal. Digital, it shouldn't be seen as a separate entity. It is part of a bigger marketing strategy, for want of a better word. And seeing those two at the top, it surprised me in terms of networking and relationships, but it was just great to see that online, offline connection being at the top, which was great, and the way it should be.
Do you know what? Your positivity has rubbed off on me there a little bit, Mr. Sumpton, because when I first saw that, I kind of thought, networking being number one, does that scream old boys network? And it doesn't really matter what we do from a marketing point of view, because so and so knows so and so at this company, and therefore we're going to be on the shortlist for that tender, etc. But I guess networking it's a brand factor, right? Whether it's the brand of the individual, the brand of the business that they represent. That kind of feels balanced to me. And not that digital presence automatically implies short-term immediate return stuff. You can build personal brand and your organization's brand within that space. But maybe that's an interesting thing, that for all the channels that are listed and then have smaller results that sit beneath that it's a longer term investment in your business and your personal brand that still is a factor.
I want to start to wrap things up here, but throw a curveball at you, okay? In terms of the answers to these and your thought on it, because there's sort of a thread that goes through it, but then it's cut. It's like, wow, how deep can I get with these things? Get to the point, Pete. So one of the questions was, is marketing seen as a cost or an investment in your business? And you're talking to marketers, but it was round about 50-50, some 50% investment, 50% cost-ish. It was, let's call it 60-40, but it was roughly an even split. So we're saying half think it's a cost, half think it's an investment in the business. The biggest blockers to success are a limited budget and limited resources, okay? Massively. Like nearly 50% said those two. And then you kind of fast forward to, apologies, I'm just getting it up on my screen, but you fast forward to how central is marketing to a corporate strategy and it's very central or fairly central. Like you're talking nearly 80% said that. And senior leadership attitudes towards marketing as well. That's like up at 80%. Yet when going back, we're not getting the budget and we're not getting the resources. That just doesn't add up to me. It's almost like we're saying, yeah, it's massively important. And senior leaders know it's massively important, but we're not going to give you any budget or time or money or resources for it. Do you think that's an educational piece for other people, or what's your thoughts?
I think so. And it's interesting. Like I mentioned the launch event. This was something that came up there. So absolutely, there is an educational element to it. But I think we as marketers need to take on the responsibility for leading on that within the organisations that we're in. You know, one of the conversations, it came up there, and I've had it several times in recent weeks, is about the role of the CMO and you know, where it exists within the construction space. But yeah, I guess marketing, not just having a voice at board level, because I think what this points out to me is that people are listened to at a senior level, but maybe aren't afforded that kind of solid board position. And that's not just for that individual, that's for marketing as the service that they represent. You know, how consistently are we not just being heard at top table, but at top table? Yeah, it doesn't happen often enough. Again, you know, I was talking to several people at huge businesses where they are big enough to justify that role at board level, and they have board reports, but they're not sat there. And I think that's the challenge for all of us, and that comes from measurement, that comes from, you know, demonstrable effectiveness. And I think that kind of renders that question on cost or investment, you know, moot at that point. If you have the data that shows that one way or another, yeah, the fact that question's being asked probably says that we don't consistently have that data at our disposal to be able to make that case. And again, going right the way back to the top of this, and then continuing with my glass half full take on all of this, the fact that we're asking those questions and we're starting to build that sort of data pool, I think is a positive thing. It's that hopefully, you know, the team at Barbour, this is something that they continue to explore and to run on a regular basis. But it's a starting point. It's a conversation that, you know, we're talking about it. As I say, I've had this conversation several times in recent weeks. It's being noted by people that as a business function, marketing maybe isn't as front and center within these organizations as it should be. You know, we speak about it often enough that, you know, a sector that is looking for growth, and, you know, an economy that is looking to construction to sort of lead on that growth. We know that comes from marketing. You know, you and I know that comes from marketing, and the data says that comes from marketing. So, yeah, we've got a pretty big job on our hands, I think, as practitioners within the sector to demonstrate that effectiveness and to give those businesses the confidence to invest in it, because, yeah, we know it will work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to ask you for a takeaway from this report. What's your main thoughts? The one thing you want people to take away from it, or just a general marketing musing?
I think, and she's of a very sunny disposition anyway, but I would say download the report, read Kate's intro to it. So I think, you know, we can sit and we can pull apart the figures loads, but I think the fact that someone is bothering to look at this, the fact that this exists now, the fact that there's a benchmark, the fact we're having this conversation, there's so many positives to be taken from it. And Kate's overview at the start, again, I won't spoil it because I think there's a lot of good stuff within there. But yeah, she's very, very clearly looking at this from a glass half full point of view. You and I spoke about this before we started the record, but the nature of what Barbour does, you know, the access to you know, visibility that it has to research and to pipeline and so on. Yeah, I'm taking all of that as she's positive for more reasons than just what's being seen in this report as well. So yeah, I think there's lots of reasons to be cheerful when it comes to marketing's role within the built environment. Yeah, we've just got to make the case better, and we've got to take ownership of it.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, very similar. I don't want to steal your words, but I think we need to build a case for marketing. And for me, recently, in working with a number of clients and trying to reshape how they see marketing and go to market themselves, it's futile without the data. It's futile without highlighting how it can be done and why it can be done, and the results that can be had. And this is a part of it. And like you said, I think this grows over time, and it becomes more important in 12 months' time if they rerun it, and hopefully they will, because we'll be able to see if things are changing or where the industry is moving to. So I think my overall thoughts, it's a huge positive for the industry. It needs to be highlighted more, and to get seats in the right positions, it's all about education, not just within the marketing sector, but externally as well in terms of what marketing is. And final thing I'll say, because we haven't actually mentioned him, and we should have at the very start, and I think this might actually be the intro to this podcast episode. Peter Chesters is the guy that has pretty much ran this with Kate's support. He's the head of demand generation at Barbour, and he led the whole thing in developing this. So hats off to you, Peter. Well done. Because this is going to be the intro to this podcast episode, let's get on with the show.